My guest came into prominence 27 years ago as a Gandhi Bahu. As Indira Gandhi's daughter-in-law, she experienced closely the inner enclave of power and tragedy. She has emerged as a woman who has battled more for the survival of living creatures on the planet than her own. Crusader, writer, politician, woman of conscience and conviction, this is a very personal rendezvous with Maneka Gandhi.
Just let your thoughts, your dreams unfold. Let's talk of love, of tales untold. Speak, so I can see your soul. Speak, so I can see your soul.
Maneka ji, I am so happy to have you here tonight.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Thank you so much for coming, for taking all this trouble. I really appreciate it.
Well, I think you've done the same with lots of members of our family. We were all happy to be interviewed by you.
When we first met, your world was complete and secure. That was 1976. A lifetime has gone by. In these last 25 years, how have you changed?
Well, I'm fatter. I'm calmer. I expect less.
But you've led a very turbulent life.
Yes, you could say that again.
A life that you could never have anticipated when you were growing up.
No, otherwise I wouldn't have bothered.
Starting off, when you were young, you were studying at Lady Shri Ram College.
No, I was studying there for a year, and then I got married.
You were also chosen as Miss Sri Ram College in 1973.
Yeah, something like that, yes.
And you did a bit of modeling.
That's right.
Was that fun?
Okay. I think when you're an army child, you're taught to get onto your feet very fast.
That's true.
When I was 16, I was already an usher at the Pragati Maidan thing, because you were taught to be independent as quickly as possible.
But tell me, how did Sanjay Gandhi come into your life?
Oh, I met him at a wedding. My father had just been posted to Delhi. And there was a wedding in the family of a cousin who was in school with Sanjay.
Okay.
So I went to his wedding and met Sanjay there. We were not even introduced. It was just somebody who walked up to me and said, "Excuse me, there's such a long line of people for the food. Do you think that I could take something from your plate?" And I sort of turned on one of those bratty little 16-year-olds and said, 17-year-old, and said, "Would you come to these places just to eat?" And I had no idea who he was. And then by the evening, he'd asked my cousin who was getting married if he could marry me.
Don't
And
tell.
the cousin had a fit. He said, "You better speak to her parents. She's 17 years old and she's my cousin." And then he came to the house and he spoke to my mother. And then my mother he just said that I would like to take her out and introduce her to my family. And my mother said, "No, she's too young." And so after a lot of persuasion, I was allowed to go out twice a week, between 6 and 8.
And where would you go?
We'd go to his house. And after about 4 months of this, Sanjay said, "Look, let's just get married and be done with it."
Mrs. Usha Bhagat, who used to work at the Prime Minister's house, she wrote to a friend, "Sanjay is head over heels in love."
Well, he virtually proposed the same day. I don't know whether it was love or what. I think it's something even stranger. It was as if I'd come home, or if he'd come home, you know. There wasn't sort of hearts racing and hearts and flowers and rings and stuff. But it was as if I'd met my other half, you know, the Ardhanareshwar.
Yes.
And he felt the same way.
Really?
You know, that's why I don't ever make a song and dance about my happy married life or something. It was just half of me. I actually just turned around and it was as if I'd known this person my whole life.
Well, he probably liked that because nobody ever talked to him like that.
I'm sure lots of people did.
I'm sure they didn't.
It was a different time, you know.
Yes.
People were more equal in those days.
You think so?
This was pre-emergency.
So when you'd go to the house, then you'd meet Indira ji.
Well, the first time I met her was at dinner, and I was so frightened when Sanjay said, "You know, we're having dinner with my mother tonight." And I said, "Oh, that's nice." And then about 20 minutes later, it struck me who his mother was. And I burst out crying and cried and cried and cried. I said, "Why can't we eat here? Why can't we eat here?" And he said, "You've got to do it sometime."
Yes.
So I was dragged off to the dining room, and by then I was so frightened that he'd gotten even more frightened, you know. So the two of us entered absolutely petrified.
Quivering.
And sat down at the table, and after about 10 minutes, my mother-in-law said, well, since Sanjay's not going to introduce us, would you like to tell me your name? Because he completely forgot.
And then you both got married.
I was married in September, yes.
Then as Sanjay's 18-year-old bride, when you stepped into the Prime Minister Indira Gandhi's house as her younger daughter-in-law, was it with some trepidation?
I think any bride stepping into any new house goes with mixed feelings. You know, you really are frightened. But specifically the Prime Minister's house, no. I'm telling you, it was a much calmer area then. You know, you remember also. The gate was always open. Our friends were in and out. I wore jeans all the time. It was a different kind of world.
You were the new entrant in a small, close-knit household. What was that like?
In the beginning, I felt very inadequate. I know I used to keep leaving notes for myself saying, talk less, read more, learn more. And literally, I mean, I look back at myself, I was like a grandchild entering the house because everybody was so grown up. And I was 10 years younger than the youngest, and I couldn't cook. And that my mother-in-law was very particular about. So we tried very hard, and I was sent off to Bhiku Manekshaw to learn cordon bleu. And it was awful. I couldn't cook at all. Because she started me off with, you know, spinach fromage or something like that.
They were the guinea pigs?
Yes, yes, they were. They were.
Did they go hungry?
No, but they had other things as well, just in case.
Safety precautions.
Yes.
But you turned vegetarian after marriage.
That's right.
Sanjay influenced you?
No, I've always been an animal person from the time I was born. You know, when I was married to him, the only thing I used to carry on about was, why can't we do something about the slaughterhouse? And why can't we do something about the animals here? And why can't we do something about, you know, and I used to go on. And one day he turned around, I think I'd been married a couple of months, and he said, I can't bear this. He said, you go on the whole day about why can't we do something about animals, and then you come back and you eat meat at night. So he said, you must learn that if you're going to say something, that you must do it yourself first. So either keep quiet or stop eating meat. And I remember that when he said it to me, I was so startled that I was drinking soup, and the soup spilt and burnt my hand. And I mean, I carry the mark till today.
Indira was a formidable woman. What kind of a mother-in-law was she?
In the beginning, I had to learn to understand my mother-in-law. And once I did, then we were very close because we had books in common. We had her love for Sanjay in common and mine.
True. That's true.
We had an easy relationship. But of course, she was exactly 40 years older than me. So it was a relationship of great respect for me. And she was a very teaching mother-in-law to all of us. In fact, the first book that I ever wrote was on plants and trees. But all of it was started by her saying, do you know which plant this is and what it does? You know, she was very deeply religious and embarrassed about it.
Really?
How odd.
Why?
And I don't know. I don't know.
What were your equations with the family?
I didn't have much of a relationship with Rajiv because I hardly saw him. And then it wasn't the same social circle. They were out a lot. And we didn't have the same friends. And Sonia, yes. I mean, because we were both in the house whenever we were there. And we spent a lot of time talking and things. You know, it's odd that in one family, two brothers and their wives could be so different. I mean, my mother-in-law balanced us all out.
Different how?
Well, Rajiv and Sonia were very Western. They had a lot of Western friends. They went out a lot. They dressed Western. They were always into what was happening in England and Europe and America in terms of fashion and friends and stuff. And their holidays were always abroad. The acquisitions were always acquisitions. And Sanjay was completely Indian. I mean, if I had to make these kind of simplistic contrasts, there were lots more to it, but he was happier talking Hindi. He dressed in kurta pajama. I wore only cotton. We didn't socialize. We didn't have any great friends who had parties or were well off or anything. And we didn't own anything. And I remember in my entire marriage, I went with Sonia once and bought a sari at Ritu's boutique. And I came back and my husband said that, have you used up all your other saris? And I said, you don't use up saris.
Just to buy another one.
So he said, why didn't you return it then? And I said, you know, it's the first time I've actually bought something in 3 years. And he said, but you don't need it, do you? I said, no, actually I don't. So he said, you return it then.
And you returned it?
So I went back and returned it to Ritu and said, I'm very sorry, but I don't actually need this. So it was a different kind of culture, which I thank God for now. Because it completely made me non-acquisitive. And Sanjay went, you know, because I was so young, it was Eliza Doolittle and Professor Higgins, you know.
Professor.
And he, okay, you know, sometimes when you go out, he said, you'll be going out a lot with Sonia and my mother for exhibitions. And I don't want you to say anything about how wonderful, I wish I had this. He said, because those people will give it to you.
Yeah.
And they will be upset because they are doing it to earn money for themselves. Yeah. But they will be too frightened not to give it to you, or they will think that it's tehzeeb. So I want you to keep very quiet when you go out. And so I would. And so every Saturday and Sunday, the three of us ladies would bundle into the car and go off to see exhibitions. And both of them would say, oh, how beautiful, how beautiful, how beautiful. And I would trail along, not saying anything. And then my mother-in-law would say, isn't there something you like here? And I'd look at her and say, and then we'd go home and they'd have this bundle of things that I'd come home empty and tell Sanjay, but why can't I do it also?
Yeah.
You know? And now I thank God for that. Yes. You never own anything. It always owns you. Whether it's jewelry, whether it's clothes, whether it's ministerial posts, whether it's anything, it owns you, it consumes you. And I think that having lost Sanjay, the most important thing to me has been freedom. I don't want to be attached to anything.
I can see that. A small family with two bahus reared in totally different cultures. Were you friends?
Sonia was much older. I can't say I was a friend, no. I was much too, the age gap was a lot. And the experience gap was even more. The interest gap was even more.
Really?
My idea of a great time was reading. Sonia's idea of a great time was shopping. So sometimes we combined. You know, sometimes I went with her to learn. Sometimes she would read. But we came from two different streams of thought. So I'm not so sure that you could call us friends, but certainly amicable.
At the time, Rajiv was a pilot, and Sanjay was his mother's main confidant politically, wasn't he?
I think when the thing started going downhill, in terms of the case coming up and the Jayaprakash Narayan movement starting, then Sanjay stepped in. But it was so gradual that none of us noticed. And I wasn't getting up in the morning and say, okay, right, I'm going into politics.
But then a year after you got married, the emergency was declared.
That's right.
During the emergency, Sanjay's power was seen as absolute.
You know, perception in hindsight was that, oh, he was very powerful. I'm not so sure that I understood that. Maybe I was the only stupid person, since I was right in the vortex. Or when you're in the eye of the storm, then things seem calm.
But you've read history. You've read the books that have been written afterwards.
All of which are wrong. All of which are wrong. Because, you know, it's like strange stories like he slapped his mother 7 times. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I read that too.
And that was repeated 1,000,000 times. And I said, goodness, somebody was standing there. It's nonsense. And now I have a 20-year-old son. And I know the closeness between my son and I.
But I'm talking about in India. The name Sanjay Gandhi evoked fear.
I'm saying it did. I'm not arguing that. What I'm saying is what they wrote about him and the kind of person he's supposed to be is completely wrong. See, he made a cardinal mistake, and that was he never in his entire life gave an interview.
Yeah.
He never talked to the press. So they attributed to him things that were insane. And then because he didn't socialize, he had nobody standing up for him.
I think it went further than that.
It did, and there's again a complete muddle now with facts. The emergency, because I was there, now he wasn't the architect of the emergency. It was a group of Siddharth Shankar Ray, Barua, K.C. Pant. You know, there was a little leftist ginger group, and they were very, very keen for it, and they pushed her and pushed her and pushed her and pushed her. And her first instinct was to make Babu Jagjeevan Ram the Prime Minister, and then wait till her case was sorted out. These chaps sat around and said, but if you give it to him, if you make him Prime Minister, you'll never come back. He'll finish you off. So they sort of instilled terror. You know, nobody minds giving up something, but if you feel that you're going to be penalized after that, then the instinct of self-preservation. I mean, even if she had no other qualities, she had the quality of self-preservation to an nth degree. So that was what happened. And then when the emergency was declared, Sanjay was unpolitical enough, I keep saying this, or not politically sensible enough to realize that you cannot mix the emergency and a program for family planning.
Yes.
Now, the family planning program was on the anvil much before. And as hideous coincidence would have it, they both intersected. And he got the flak for both. We must remember one thing. He was 27 years old. We never forgave him any of his shortcomings. Anything. We expected him to have the wisdom of a 100-year-old.
It's not that we expected that from him. It was he who came in the foreground.
True, true. It's not an apology of him.
No.
It's just that there's a lot of muddle about times, dates, who did what to whom. But there was no doubt about the fact that strange things did happen in his name.
Tell me, what was Sanjay like as a person?
Probably the brightest human being I've ever met. Silent, but silent in a very sort of peaceful manner.
Puritanical in some ways?
Very puritanical. Very. I mean, the first lesson was, you know, you're my wife. I really don't appreciate smoking, drinking. It was one of those 1920s puritanical. He was frugal. He ate very little. You know, it was dal, a sabzi, roti.
That's it.
Except in his dal, he always put a lot of sugar for some reason. I think that's the Parsi blood. That's where the Guju blood comes in. You know, the Gujaratis always have that meetha dal.
Yes, 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 yes.
So he always had arhar dal because he was half of him was UP. But he put the sugar into it because he was half Gujarati.
Probably learned that from his father.
Probably.
And he was very close to his father.
He was.
You said he was that rare animal, a considerate husband.
He was a very considerate husband. Of course, he had to be trained into it.
He had to be trained.
All men have to be trained.
For sure.
When they're considerate, when they take to the training.
And they don't know they're being trained.
No. No, I remember how he started, actually. He said, I went to Pune, and I went, and I thought since I was in, he'd gone for Maruti trials. And he said, I went to buy a sari for you. And the shopkeeper wouldn't take any money, so I didn't buy the sari. So I said, oh, thank you very much for the present. And that was the only time he ever gave me a present in my entire marriage life. But it was as good as a present.
You know? The thought was there.
Yeah. Now, I remember 1 week before he died, after we finished the meetings and everything, I discovered that I didn't have any clothes for the next day. I just completely forgot. So I took off my clothes, went to sleep. When I woke up in the morning, he had washed my clothes. And it was, you know, it was cold, so there was a fire on. And he was drying them before a fire, and he'd got up at 4:30 in the morning to do it, because we were supposed to be off at 7. That's you know, nice, yeah.
In a span of 3 years, you saw both the highs and lows of political life. After the emergency, Indira and Sanjay both lost their seats. What was it like at home?
It was wonderful. It was wonderful. I think I was so thrilled.
You were thrilled?
Yes, I was thrilled. My mother-in-law was very shell-shocked for the first 1 or 2 months. And she hardly came out of her room. And she did a lot of thinking. And there was a lot of upheaval in the house with people going away and nobody talking and stuff. And then when she realized that there was lots of love to be had at home, you know, and it wasn't the end of the world. And then, you know, she would play badminton,
Yeah.
and there would be long walks. There were lots of lovely things. Those are my happiest years. And I moved the whole house in my Jeep from to 12 Wellington Crescent. And we had so much more freedom. I saw so much more of my husband. I grew up. I was so much more involved in their lives.
Mm.
So from my point of view, I thought it was wonderful. Because then it became very tightly knit, because the whole Congress party disappeared.
For sure.
There was very little money, believe it or not. We didn't even have a cook. And they were lovely years. We went on holidays. I remember once we went on a holiday together, she and I, to Darjeeling. And she would wake me up in the morning and she would say, look at that mountain, look at that mountain.
Just the
And
two of you?
just the two of us. And I would walk 2 kilometers every morning to go to a shop to get food. And we'd spent a week there, and she was getting very tired of the food I was getting, and I was getting very nervous because, and I remember ringing up Sanjay and saying, please come, please come. So he arrived with the whole Youth Congress lot,
Oh,
you know.
dear. That was the end of your piece.
No, but I conceived my son there. So I remember Darjeeling, and I remember that holiday.
So anyway, the wheel turned again, and within 36 months, Indira was back into power. And it looked like, for us, it looked like happier days were returning to the
It
Gandhi
looked like,
family.
yes, we were going to live happily ever after.
Yes. You had been married 6 years. Now you were carrying your child.
Yes. When I was expecting, and I found that we had opposing blood groups. So when you have that, you have to have an injection to see whether your blood is okay every week. So a doctor used to come every week to take blood out. Now this is the one thing I'm most scaredest of in the whole world. So I would run round and round the house. The doctor would run around after me, and Sanjay would run around, and my mother-in-law would stand on the veranda and say, really, Menaka? Really, Menaka? Every time she would see me running around, I keep saying, vampires, vampires. As labor of 12 hours, and everybody would say, shh, don't scream, it's very inelegant. And finally, Sanjay delivered the baby.
That's right.
Yeah. I said, no doctor's going to deliver my baby. My husband will deliver it. So then Sanjay did.
And then Maneka ji, it all changed.
As life does.
And then Maneka ji, it all changed.
As life does.
With that one flight Sanjay took on the 23rd of June, 1980. The crash set off a chain of political events in India that would later unfold. And it altered your own life immediately and drastically. Knowing that Sanjay had a reckless streak, didn't you have any premonition, any foreboding?
Yes, I did. I had 1 year before he died. My mother-in-law and I both knew on the same day that he was going to die.
What do you mean?
You know, it's sort of just one night. I woke up and I realized that he was going to go. And I took to Amala. And every night I would say, please take me, take me, take me. If you've got to do an exchange, take me. And my mother-in-law took to keeping Tuesdays as a fast because of Hanuman, the air. She didn't know why I was praying, and I didn't know why she was keeping a fast. And then when he died on a Monday. And the next day, she didn't keep her fast. And so I asked her, I said,
Why didn't you keep it?
why didn't you keep your fast? And she said, well, he's dead, so it doesn't matter now. And I said, you started it on this month, didn't you? And she said, yes. And I said, did you know he was going to go? And she said, yes, I did. And that's why I was praying. And it turned out that it was virtually the same day.
How could you know?
It was just something. And then 1 month before he died, I used to cry all the time. I used to cry all the time. It was just so frightening. I just look at him and cry and cry and cry and cry.
Why?
Just like I couldn't understand it. And then I started complaining all the time about my teeth falling out.
Oh.
And my teeth falling out. My teeth, I dream of it at night and everything. And many years later I read that it's a premonition. But anyway, to come back, 1 week before he died, Sai Baba came, Satya Sai Baba, and he said to me, he said, "Why are you crying? Your husband's not going to die." And I didn't know I was crying because he was going to die, you see. And he kept saying, "You must stop your body from crying because he's not going to die. You will die before him. Don't worry." And then the evening before he died, we went for a ride in the same plane. And it was the first time that he was going in it. And we got into the plane, and I screamed and screamed and screamed and screamed for, I think, 2 hours. And in the air, we came down. I was doing, you know that when your whole body is exhausted with crying.
Yeah.
And I ran home. I went to my mother-in-law, and I said, "Ma, you know, I've never asked you for anything in my life. And I need you now to tell Sanjay not to fly this plane. He can fly any plane he wants, but not this one." And so she said to Sanjay in front of me, and Dhirendra Brahmachari was also there, and she said that, you know, Meneka's never been so strong about something. So she's saying ki na jao to na jao to. So he said, "Oh," you know, he was a bit thing about it. So he said, And she said, "No, I'm afraid I have to put my foot down." Because, you know, I was standing at the back and saying, "Please, Ma." No, because he wasn't going to listen to me. And then Dhawan came in, and Dhawan said, "Arey, ye to mardon ka jahaz hai, khali mard is par ja sakte hain. And Menka ji aise bol rahi hain kyunki wo aurat hai aur ye..." And he just blabbered on about mardon ka jahaz for half an hour. And then my mother-in-law said, "Sanjay, is it safe?" And I said, "Ma, it isn't safe. It's a horrible plane. It's a horrible plane. Believe me, it's a horrible plane." And Sanjay said, "Nahi, and 2-3 din mein theek ho jayega. She'll get used to it." And the next morning he was dead. So I knew, you know, I think because he was half of me, I had to know.
How was the news broken to you?
You know, the ayah came in and said that, "Badi Bibi ji, aapko hospital bula rahi." And I quickly threw on something and ran to the hospital, but I knew. So I was crying in the car while going, and I saw the body coming out. And then it was as if somebody punched me in the stomach, so, you know, I doubled over and screamed. And my mother-in-law said, "Kamre mein dal do, kamre mein dal do." So I went into a room at Willingdon Crescent. You know? And then she came and she said, "You know, he's not dead. And he's still there, and they're operating on him." And then she locked the door on me and told everybody not to tell me because she thought she would break it gently. And those were the worst, you know, 2 hours of my life. I nearly died. I remember saying, "If you don't want me to be married to him, I promise I'll leave him, but just keep him alive. Whatever you want. And, you know, maybe you can switch us both." And then she said, "He's dead." And then I don't remember anything. I remember going to see his body. But by then I was completely detached from it. It wasn't me anymore. And I think she said, "Kiss him." And I couldn't. I had nothing to do with this body. It had nothing to do with anybody. I just couldn't feel anything anymore. I don't remember the funeral. I don't remember anything. I have no recollection at all of anything. I just sort of disappeared somewhere. I can't remember anything of those 2 years. I think we'd have some water now.
Yeah.
And I think I just woke up 2 years later. And I just sort of drift in and drift out. I had no idea. And my son was 100 days old. And I don't remember him at all after that, till he's about 2. So,
Really?
But of course I must have had lots to do with him because he was reading by the time he was 11 months. So I must have been there teaching him, you know, because that was all I had. I was stuck in a room with him and I never came out for 2 years.
But you know, maybe that was a protection for you, going
Maybe
away.
it was. Maybe it was.
Because the terrible fact of sudden widowhood at the age of 23 could make anybody go to pieces in that sense.
Yeah. You know, when Sanjay died, I had nobody. I mean, I had my mother, who was a pillar, and my sister and brother, but in actual fact, there was just him, and then there wasn't him. And then there wasn't me either.
Were you frightened?
I was very frightened. I was very frightened in the few times that I allowed myself to think. Because I had no idea whether I would stay in this house, where I would go. I had no money. I didn't even know if I had a car. I had no idea of our finances.
See, girls start life at the age of 23.
And yes, and I finished it.
So how did you endure it, and how did you console yourself?
I didn't. I got up and I ate and I slept. And I talked to my son and I ate and I slept. I watched a lot of films in those days. Somebody lent me their VCR. And I used to watch about 6 of them a day. I don't remember seeing a single one.
No.
But I just sort of, flickering images.
And somebody else's life.
That's right. Some probably worse than mine.
Did the family understand your despair?
No, no. I don't think so. I don't think anybody could understand it.
2 grieving women who loved the same man.
Yes, and unfortunately, that bond broke.
But it should have brought you closer.
It should have. But I was too young. And my mother-in-law was too old. That's all I can put.
So what happened?
I don't know. Firstly, I think she was never normal again. Never. She was not Indira Gandhi. She lost everything in that crash. And she never picked herself up again. And she became very fragile. And very bitter. And her attitude was, why didn't you die?
Don't tell me.
It was like that, and she saw it as an either-or situation. And I would keep saying that nobody asked me, otherwise I would have gone. But she was utterly destroyed. For her, he was everything, both political advisor, son, hero. So she found herself very vulnerable. She became very obsessive about dynasty.
She did.
Because then she wanted another son. And then what happened after that was just Rajiv stepping in. And now she had to go back to him. And he hadn't been talking to her for 3 years. So then she had to recultivate him. She had to bring him in. He had to fill a vacuum for which she hadn't even trained him for. And therefore she had to give in a lot to his demands and his family's demands. And one of their main demands was that Maneka has to go.
Really?
It was a very simple barter.
Like what?
We'll leave if she doesn't go.
Who said that?
They did.
What do you mean? I don't understand this.
My mother-in-law
Yeah.
had to listen to all sorts of demands and commands being put on her. That Maneka must go. She cannot go out here. She will not go out.
Why must
She will not sit at the same table as us.
Why?
There was a time when I had to sit at a different table when guests came.
Why?
Just because it would be an order. It was very strange. Even then I understood that she was as weak and helpless as I was.
Indira ji.
Yeah. I think both of us became victims of a third person. Both of us were victimized. She because she had to listen to this, I because it had to be done to me.
But there was never a showdown.
Who was I to do a showdown? I was too young for this entire thing.
But was there a falling apart between you and Sonia ji and that side
No,
of the
it was
family?
just that I don't think that it had anything to do with their like or dislike for me. I think it had to do more with property, if I know my sister-in-law. So it was, she has to go. She cannot be part of this. She cannot get anything. She has to sign her rights away. So I did all that. And ultimately it was just go. Like in all traditional Indian homes, the widow is unnecessary. What was I doing there?
What place does a widow have in her husband's family after he's gone?
If the family is a mature family, she has the same place. But unfortunately, whether we're in rich families or poor families, a widow, especially if she's a young widow, is treated very badly.
When you lived one Saptajang with your son, were you at least financially well provided for?
No. No, I wasn't. My husband had a trucking business, and he had 24 trucks, which had been given to somebody on rent. And he'd built this up over the years. And one by one, I sold each truck.
So how did you manage otherwise?
I wrote, I sold bits and pieces of jewelry. It was not a nice time now.
It was a terrible time, I'm sure.
But when I look back on it, my hair stands on end.
Really? But you know, for most dynasties, the Nehru Gandhis, the Kennedys, the crucial relationships are always the direct bloodline.
Yes.
Mother and son, father and daughter. Nothing else matters.
Yeah, nothing else
And
matters.
again, for Indira ji, it was her direct bloodline that mattered. Firoz Varun Gandhi. You had her grandson.
Well, he didn't become the center of the conflict. She wanted very much to keep him. She adored him.
Yeah.
And, well, he was all I had, you know.
He was all you had.
So if you were going to throw me out, then my son goes with me. But he was sent back all the time. And we spent a lot of time with her even then. You know, I was very happy for him that he was loved by her. She had a lot to give even then. But remember, he was only 4 when she died.
He doesn't remember her at all.
And he remembers only bits and pieces, glimpses, you know.
Mm-hmm.
I remember when he came to the dining table for the first time, and she put his high chair, you know, little toddler's chairs, right next to him. And it was the first time he was going to eat out. I mean, eat with the grown-ups. And she started feeding him herself. And after she fed him about 4 spoons, he said, "Dadi, humko thak aa gayi." And she kept repeating it to everybody who came. She said, "Dadi, humko thak aa gayi."
But 2 years later, when Indira died, how did you feel then?
I felt awful. I felt awful. There was a lot of nobility in her, and she was the head of the family. I always thought at the back of my mind, at some stage we would get together again. And then she was dead.
Do you regret that you never made up, both of you?
I'm sad about it, yes. I still think now she would have been very proud of me. Because 10 years later, I turned into exactly the kind of person that she wanted me to be. You know, and I think that when I brought my book out on plants and then Hindu names and then I went through all the trouble of all that learning, I think she would have been very proud of me at every step.
I think so too.
It's a pity she didn't get the time.
Bringing up your child as a single parent, was that a tough call?
No, it hasn't been tough at all. Feroz has been a very happy child. And I don't think he's made any demands on me. And he's been very, very bright his whole life. And like his father, he has an eidetic memory. He's been nice to have.
What kind of a mother are you?
Very strict.
Controlling?
Controlling not in things like food or timings, homework, none of that. But controlling in setting values. And that's where I've been very strong.
You lead very simple lives, you and Feroz.
Yeah.
Actually, Feroz said something very interesting to me the last time I met him, when he came over. He said, most of my growing up years, I thought we were very poor.
Yes, it's true.
And he said life was so simple.
It was. As I said, when we left the house, we had 1 bed and 1 cupboard. And then we had no furniture in it. For years and years.
That's why I thought you were poor.
Yes. And I don't think he's ever seen any jewelry. We have no locks in my house. I just don't have locks.
How free you must feel.
That's right, so I could walk out any time.
Did Feroz ask a lot of questions about his father?
He does ask a lot of questions.
And what do you tell him?
What I can remember.
Yes. But has he read a lot of books on the family?
He's read all the ones that have been printed and makes him very angry.
Makes him very angry.
You know, which say nasty things about my husband. Because he doesn't have that kind of picture in his mind.
What kind of a picture does he have?
The kind of picture I have.
That's right. He has to.
Yep.
He meets his cousins and Rahul and
Sometimes,
Sonia.
not very often.
You don't meet them at all. Are the differences irreconcilable?
There's not differences or not. You don't become a relative just by being related. Each one of us chooses the people we want to be with. And that's it.
All that remains of the family today are the 2 widows, 3 children.
Yep.
That's all. And then these 2 are divided.
We don't know whether they're divided together. Who knows what life brings for them?
Today your son, Feroz Varun, is 20. What are your aspirations for him?
I hope he has an easier life than I do.
I hope so too.
I hope he is not as blunt as I am. I give him wishes that have to do with his intellectual abilities. So I can't wish for him, I hope he becomes a great lawyer, I hope he becomes a great politician. No.
Would you like him to be in politics?
I would like him to finish college.
Does he want to go into politics?
Yes. Maybe. If he wants to go into politics, it would be easier to be in a party.
Because there is a lot of media hype that he's going to come into politics.
No, everyone is looking for a tamasha in this family all the time.
Yes.
somebody's a bad guy, somebody's a good guy.
It's a soap.
Coming
It's a
up.
major
It's a soap
soap.
opera, yes. And there's such few characters in this soap opera that each one is invested with
Yes.
properties that perhaps they have or they don't have.
Yes.
We will have to watch him.
4 times minister, 5 times MP. That's a distinguished achievement. Even your critics have conceded your political flair and gutsiness.
I don't have a flair for politics, and nor do I care what I become. It's for me just a road to travel on.
At heart, you're really a crusader, aren't you?
It's not even a crusader. I believe that I have the ability to put things right. And when I see something happening, which to my mind is morally wrong, I can't tell you what happens to me. And this is something goes off in my head like a firecracker.
I know somebody in Julbagh who said, I mean, she came to the house, she came to the door, and she started screaming at the watchman, at the chowkidars, and saying, you people have been ill-treating the cows that have been straying here. And I thought to myself, that's strange. She doesn't have to do that.
I can't help it. No, I can't help it. I can't walk away. You know, it's like in my constituency. One woman will come and she'll say, my husband has thrown me out of his house because he's taken another woman. And then I'll send the police to pick up that husband. I'll say, I'm giving you 24 hours. Now I want this woman back in your house. So there's a certain elder sister attitude, you know, where they know that I'm there for them, which is why I win again and again. I never win because I have such a sweet tongue. And I don't win because anybody thinks that I'm politically even there. Yeah, and then the letters that I get are not related to my ministry. They don't even say Maneka Gandhi Social Welfare. I just got one last week who says Maneka Gandhi Wild Animal Minister. And my secretary said, they should have left out the animal.
So, is it ever rewarding?
It's very rewarding, my goodness. Even at this age, when, let me give an example.
Yes.
This actually happened. Going for a meeting, a very important meeting, and there was a donkey on the way. He was crying, and if you've ever seen a donkey cry, you'll never survive it.
It sounds awful.
Huge tears from those huge eyes. And he had a whole back that was encrusted with pus. So I cancelled the meeting, brought him home, and we spent the whole night taking 1.5 buckets of pus out of his body. We named him after my favorite film star, Dilip Kumar. And
look, I don't think that's fair.
And no, we loved him. I mean, you know, because I loved him. And he became my companion. And I remember the doctor had to come every day to give him an injection. And every time he would see the doctor, he'd go and hide his face behind a tree because he thought if his face was hidden,
nobody would see him.
Nobody would see him. And we had lots of bhang growing outside. You know.
Oh, and he'd eat the bhang and he'd laugh.
One night he ate the bhang and he sang the whole night. And if you've ever heard a donkey singing intoxicatedly.
How did it sound?
It was wonderful. We all stood out. We all stood out. And I said, I think I'm in heaven. For me, there was no more moment of happiness.
Yes.
And seeing a donkey rolling around.
Who had nearly died.
Yeah. I still have the capacity to go crazy when small good things happen.
But you deal better with animals than with humans.
Definitely. They need me more. I also deal with humans that I need much better than humans who aren't in need. I think God made me marry Sanjay. Only because he gave me this small amount of power to use for that. And that's why I have to use it. You know? Otherwise, I would have been out of here long ago.
Maneka ji, you never wanted to remarry?
No. I didn't feel incomplete enough to remarry. And by then, I'm sort of a fairly tough old bird. I don't think I would ever dream of remarrying.
No, because you had 6 years with your husband, and now...
And an eternity without.
21 years without him. What keeps that commitment so strong?
No idea. But once you've known somebody who is part of you, who is half of you, then you know the difference. Or if I'd been lucky enough to have somebody come along who would then complete me, then maybe. But it didn't happen.
You still feel married to Sanjay?
I don't know. Do I still feel married to him? Well, I still shout at him. Say, just wait, just hang in there until I come and then watch it. He's got a lot of apologizing to do. So I'll catch up with him sooner or later.
Tell me, does time blur memory?
Yes, it does. It blurs memory, it doesn't blur emotion or feeling.
It heals as well.
It never heals.
Never heals.
It never heals. You put it into a little black box and you lock the box up. And then when you have time, then you open it and rummage through, you know. But less and less. You open it less and less.
Tell me, Maneka ji, today, are there any regrets?
Lots of them. Everybody has regrets all the time. I think I should have been stronger then. I think I should have learnt more. I think I shouldn't have let Sanjay fly.
Yes. What in the end should people know about Maneka Gandhi?
I think that if you had to write an epitaph, you would have to just write, she tried her very best to change as much as she could. And that's it. Both herself and the world around her.
Well, I think in your personal odyssey, you have accomplished so much.
Well,
You've been a very brave traveler, and I wish you a safe and fulfilled journey.
thank you.
I want to thank you so much for coming here this evening.
I'm happy to.
Thank you for this rendezvous.